The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to our friends down under, and good afternoon to those of us over across the ditch in New Zealand, where Mrs. Needham is at the moment. At least she got away from the rain. So, yeah, Hank, thank you. I hope you got some good rain. I've been looking at the weather forecast. It looked like you got plenty. And Mick D is back from his jaunts around the world on a cruise, but he's at home here in Queensland, which today, for a change, is sunny. We've had 11, 12 days of just endless rain. And he's here with us. So's his mate Neil from Chinchilla. He's a cotton farmer up there. Very good. Daniel co-traders, those guys. And Bernie. Yes, we're happy to have Bernie Sanders with us today, of course. Good morning, John. And to answer your question, yes, we're all socialists, especially me. Good on you. Okay, so lovely to have you here, guys. And let's see what we've got here. So Justin and Keith are both with us. Tutorial guys. Juan's with us. Jeff. Thinking of doing a tutorial. He's my farmer friend from Iowa, and been involved, no doubt, in politics. Hank's down in the Hunter Valley. Colin, good to have you with us. Ben also. Albert, he's a tutorial guy. Adrian Lee, he's a tutorial guy. He's written the most interesting email to me saying that he went away from the Daniel Code for a while, explored a few other things, found all of that disappointing, and he's come back to the Daniel Code and is going to have a refresher on his tutorial. Well, I mean, let me tell you what's been happening here in Queensland and in many parts of the rest of Australia. Mick and, well, Neil appreciate that he's desperate for water. He's a cotton farmer. And we've been having one of the worst droughts in living memory in Australia. It's been running for 7-8 years. And really quite extraordinary stuff. And all droughts always break with a flood. I remember that from my days on the land when I had a sheep and cattle properties out at Tarcutta, near Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, and I sat through a three-year drought there, and it was horrible. When it breaks, it comes with a flood, and all your neighbours' garbage comes down the river onto your property, and you finish up with thistleweed everywhere and rubbish. But the rain, of course, is a blessing. Jeff, oh, good. Welcome to the Daniel Code. Jeff signed up for a membership. Good on you. Let's talk more. So what happened here when we started to get some rain is that the pool got to overflow level. Why they don't have automatic overflows on swimming pools, I don't know. Maybe mine's just the low-tech version. But I pumped it out, and it looked like there was an awful lot of water coming, so I let the whole lot go, which takes out about 2.5 feet of water from the skimmer box. Add in the 8 or 9 inches to the top of the pool where it was, so you're talking over 3 feet of water, or over a metre to our younger, more digitally switched on folks. And then yesterday I had to pump it out again. Incredible, isn't it? Over a metre of water. And it's very blessed, and we need it no more than the guys in the land are desperate for it. It's been a shocking thing, the drought. Terrible thing. And then, of course, bushfires on top of it. We'll talk about that a bit later as we go through. But anyway, today I posed the question, are we all socialists now? And the answer to that is probably a little more than you realize. But let's move on and see where we can get to today with answering that and the other questions that markets pose to us. Droughts are only a consolidation. Neil. Oh, bless you. Okay, so markets are rational, orderly, sometimes predictable. Those of you who've been with us a while know all about this. Akshay's arrived. Welcome, Akshay. Good to have you with us. Today we're going to talk about a bit about US politics and a bit about markets. And of course, the man with the eyebrows and not a whole lot of hair on his head is, of course, Bernie. Bernie's a bit of a phenomenon, and he's excited members of the Democratic Party, particularly millennials, although there are all sorts of polls stating that he has lots of other support as well. And the answer to all of that is we'll see as the nomination process unfolds. For those of you who are not in America and don't read American papers, the US is in the process of running its presidential selection process. The parties run various proceedings called caucuses or primaries in some states, and the people who wish to be president put themselves up to the public and subject themselves to a bit of scrutiny and what have you. And Bernie, of course, anytime you reach first name recognition in politics, it means you're a big deal. And Bernie is a very interesting character. He's a crusty old senator from Vermont who's been in the Senate for a very, very long time. And he's a self-avowed socialist, although he calls himself a democratic socialist. The point of socialism is that the assets, the spoils, if you like, from production are characterized by social ownership of the means of production and workers' self-management of enterprise, as well as political theories and movements associated with such systems. Now, Bernie, I don't think, is a true socialist, but he's certainly going to be whacked with that label, which in the United States is anathema. It's interesting that most of the rest of the Western world, Europe, UK in particular, add Canada, Australia, and New Zealand to that, would not be too frightened of that word, because much of the ideas of socialism have already come to those countries, and they come under a different guise. They don't come as socialism, they come as a caring government that's producing benefits to large sectors of the community, and that's always proposed, and I think the answer truly is that it is so, is there are many things that the larger community needs, and wealthy societies, which most of the Western world are capable of doing things for those who are unable to provide it for themselves. So if you're wondering about my politics, let me tell you that many years ago, or maybe not so many years ago, my politics was somewhere to the right of Genghis Khan. I was a smart young lawyer who thought I knew everything about the world. I despised those less fortunate and those on the dole, and I was a pretty nasty, intolerant character. One of the joys of aging is that your views of the world and of politics shift. And as the years have gone by and I've seen more, I have more empathy for people. I am certainly not frightened of some of the socialist initiatives that we have in this country, very much so. And they're very, very worthwhile, most of them. But let's run through what Bernie's about. This is what he said in a lecture at Georgetown University in 2015. He says an economy, democratic socialism, as he calls it, means creating an economy that works for all, not just the very wealthy. Well, you can't really object to that. Any reasonable person would say, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. Reforming the political system, which Sanders says is grossly unfair and in many respects corrupt. Got to give that a tick. Absolutely no doubt about that statement at all. Recognize healthcare and education as rights. I don't know about that. I certainly believe in a compassionate society we should be able to extend health care to everyone, which includes those who can't afford health care should be able to get good health care. The education one's slightly different because it comes with pros and negatives. So the next issue he's big on is protecting the environment, and you know, that's pretty well accepted everywhere as a good concept. It's a good idea that we should be striving to do that. And of course, the devil's in the detail, because how do we do that? And once you start talking about carbon taxes and shutting down major industries and getting away from fossil fuels, which, let's face it, we didn't have coal and we didn't have oil in this world, it'd be a very, very different place, wouldn't it? And he goes on to say it's a vibrant democracy he wants based on the principle of one person, one vote. Well, we'd all agree with that, and we have that at the moment. I don't know what he's talking about there, but it may be a twist on the American issues with immigration. So he says democratic socialism is not tied to Marxism or the abolition of capitalism, but describes a program of extensive social benefits funded by broad-based taxes. Well, there's where the sting is in the scorpion's tail, isn't it? What exactly does he mean, and how much is this dream of socialism going to cost? Let's move on. So we move on from what he was saying in 2015 to what Bernie's saying right now, and he starts with he's very, very strong on climate change. The debate is over. Climate change is real and caused by human activity. Well, you know, there's lots to dispute that. He wants to tax carbon emissions, repeal fossil fuel. This is a bit like the AOC Green Deal, and of course she's become a great supporter of Bernie. She's his auxiliary on the stump. When he's not available, she runs a lot of his meetings, and she's a very, very popular young lady with the left-wing millennial group of the Democrats. Bernie said he's introducing a plan to make tuition at public universities and colleges free by taxing Wall Street. Well, you see, that sentence there really describes the conundrum. Nothing is free. If you want to give a benefit to one sector to make their tuition at public universities and colleges free, someone's got to pay for that. And that's the question that applies to all of these issues of socialism. Some of these ideas have considerable merit. But he says he would fund that by taxing Wall Street speculators. Well, that's going to be a drop in the bucket compared to the cost of what he's proposing. And, you know, if you take the corollary of that he wants to make tuition in public universities and colleges free, and I suppose that comes under the idea of a basic good to the community, a smarter, better educated community, may be, in someone's view, more productive. I have grave doubts about that. I think a lot of the stuff that we teach at universities doesn't actually make for a person to be more productive in the workplace. A lot of it's pretty narrow and theoretical in my view. And then, of course, if you're going to pay for it by taxing, it won't just be Wall Street speculators. You're going to have massive taxes to pay for that. Then where's the equity for the people, for the parents who've saved up over the years and paid for their child's tuition, like many of us have? Are we going to get a refund on that? Is student debt's going to be forgiven, which Bernie proposes? What about the guys that have worked terribly hard to pay off their student debt, or in the process of trying to do that? I mean, is there some compensation for that? I mean, with all these things, the devil is in the detail. And of course, don't get too excited about what you hear on the stump, because there are the US Constitution, like most countries, has severe restrictions on what legislatures can actually do. So you've seen that with Trump, and at his 2016 His policies then were very popular and lots of support, although not majority support, but very substantial support. And then what happened? Well, Paul Ryan, who was then the leader of the Republicans in the House, was pretty cool on Trump. And I think, in truth, Mitch McConnell was as well. And they didn't, while they had control of both houses and the presidency, they didn't push to get many of those ideas done. And then, of course, at the midterms, they lost control of the House. So that sort of legislation is pretty hard to get through, particularly in the U.S., where the Senate's a house of review. Go on with his ideas. He's going to create jobs by investing heavily in new infrastructure. Great. No one has an issue with that. Infrastructure is great. The problem is who pays and how much of that infrastructure has got a real cost, reward benefit enough to make it worthwhile in some way. So tax the rich. Sanders wants to pay for these proposals with a series of tax hikes and fees, mostly leveled at the wealthiest of Americans. Easy to say. I just don't know how that's going to happen. I personally don't think it's doable. The rich, the wealthiest people have the best tax advice, the best lawyers. They also have money. They can go and live wherever they want to. And the whole issue with socialism has always been that once you cut the legs off the most entrepreneurial, the most go-getter folks in the community, you destroy the large part of the wealth creation that the whole community benefits from, no matter how much you may despise the uber wealthy. The fact is, it's those rare individuals who create the massive wealth that eventually large parts of it do trickle down through taxation. He's right, though, that the U.S. taxation system, and I should say the same applies to this country and UK, the tax system is not really working to extract taxes from the people who can most afford to pay it, which is the whole idea of proportional taxation. So you have a situation with Amazon. Jeff Bezos, the wealthiest man on the planet, just dipped into petty cash to buy a $300 million house in LA for his new lady friend to enjoy. But Amazon pays very, very little tax. And in truth, that's so of all the mega companies, the FANGs, and they all seem to not be paying what the man in the street would consider a fair share of their tax. And that's a reflection of the political system, that political systems designed that way. If you really wanted to tax everyone in a fair way, it's easy enough to do if the political will was there. And of course, Bernie's a great supporter of women's rights and the LGBTQ crowd. So he's on those sorts of policies. Not only is he a bit of a Democratic dream, but he's largely remade that part of the Democratic Party. In 2016, the healthcare for all proposal, which Bernie ran there, was seen as outlandish, as seen as way outside the mainstream, and couldn't be seen as possible, couldn't be tolerated. Have a look at it now. The people who are up on the stage at the Democratic debates, Biden, Pete Buttigieg, I found out how to say that eventually. How you get Buttigieg out of that word, I don't know, but that's for him to decide. Sanders, Elizabeth Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, Steyer, the other few guys who've been there, they have all put their hand up and said, Yes, healthcare, free healthcare for all, with a couple of little variations. Mayor Pete says, yeah, free healthcare for all who want it, but you can keep your insurance policies if you want, which is nothing contentious about that, really. I mean, that's the situation in Europe, UK, Australia, Canada, go on and on. Almost every Western country, the more developed Western countries at least, apart from the US, have universal health care of one form or another. But anyway, let's go on with more of Bernie, get to the contentious stuff. He'd declare a moratorium on deportations, offer a swift pathway to citizenship for all illegal migrants who've been there for 5 years. That takes care of the DACA guys. He'd break up ICE. Border jumping would cease to be a crime and become a civil offence, so the Muslim ban would be abolished. He'd back sanctuary cities that refused to work with the US. I mean, that's starting to get to crazy stuff. You're going to support some cities that are breaking the law. Well, you've got to change the law first, haven't you? Asylum seekers would not have to wait in Mexico, welcomed into the USA. Well, how long's a piece of string? There's going to be a queue around the world to get in. In fact, they just walk in, according to Bernie. Family separations end. Never liked that idea much. Administration's treatment of illegal immigration as a criminal and national security matter is inhuman, impractical, and must end. Well, yeah, it's pretty tough. What's the alternative? The alternative is if you don't have some fairly severe restraints on illegal immigration, you're going to get swamped. And that was what happened pretty much under the Obama years. And that's sort of democratic policy, although, if you go back a few years, 2006, there was Amy Klobuchar saying, we need a wall, we need to control immigration. We let in masses of lowly qualified immigrants. They work for less pay, they're undermining the working man, they're taking jobs from Americans. That's the contrary argument, which of course has plenty of merit in it. Bernie Trump's war, which Bernie calls racist, would be history. And migrants who enter illegally would qualify for federal health care and the same social welfare benefits as U.S. citizens. Well, immigrant officials say Sanders' proposals would create an irresistible magnet for millions of migrants from all over the world to stampede in the USA. That's absolutely true. I mean, the practical implications of some of this stuff just seems to an outsider to be plain silly. But anyway, that's what Nation magazine's had to say about it, and you can see how that translates from free college and universities, forgive student debts, free health care, no boots on the ground in Syria, let the Middle Eastern countries lead the fight in their own region against the Islamic State group and others. And the whole tenor is free, 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 and who pays? Well, as long as it's not you and you're speaking and preaching to the disaffected, as Bernie is, I mean, let's face it, almost all voters are disaffected about something or other, and, it's as shallow as what good is this to me? Some of you will know I've been a long-time critic of the taxation policies of the Australian government, in the firm view that we pay far too much tax and that they're don't use it well at all. Kerry Packer famously said that. He said you've got an obligation to avoid paying any more tax than you're legally required to because the government doesn't spend it terribly well. Well, I've long been a proponent of that view, but you see, recently my daughter 3 years ago got a federal government scholarship which paid for her PhD studies for 3 years. Completely, and she's now got a federal government scholarship to do 4 years of medicine at Notre Dame University in Sydney. So together, I mean, you're talking about close to $300,000 worth of grants or replacement of fees or absent fees. It's a lot of money, so I'm no longer grumbling about the government because at least for my daughter's part of it all, she's been greatly benefited by the push to for that of course is for elite education. We don't have free education in Australia per se. We have a very generous financial program that almost anybody can go to university, and the government will pay for it on the basis that when you start working, you'll pay it back over time. Very generous, actually. But the free component, where government scholarships, they're like hen's teeth, very few and far between. But anyway, my daughter's been lucky enough to be the recipient of a couple of those, so that changes your view a little bit. So, interestingly, that the New York Times has really summed up what I'm trying to say today, that Bernie Sanders isn't actually a socialist in any normal sense of the term. He doesn't want to nationalize major industries, replace markets with central planning. He's expressed admiration not for Venezuela but for Denmark, and socially, democracies like Denmark are in fact quite nice places to live, with societies that are, if anything, freer than our own. That's obviously written as a kick up for Bernie, and it's not quite correct, because healthcare is a very major industry, billions and billions, hundreds of billions, excuse me, of dollars involved in excuse me, in healthcare for the United States, and Bernie's going to close down all private involvement in that. No more private insurance. It's going to be government healthcare, and you can see what's happened in the UK with that. It's really not so good as it may appear to be. And there's the one big problem with socialism that people don't ever talk about enough. It takes away the greatest gift to wealth creation and innovation, the spirit of adventure, innovation, individual ambition and personal drive, which for all its faults has been historically the great creator of new ideas, new products, and most importantly, wealth. Great individualism has created the greatest wealth that the world has ever known. And that's that's where socialism loses it. If you lose the top pick of your top performers, cut them all out, take away their incentives, which is what socialism does, get rid of the best producers, the best of those people who are motivated by success, by money, by achievement. Not all of that is laudable. It doesn't get you martyred, but many of the side effects of the movement of individualism in our economies is repugnant. Some of it has pretty nasty side effects, but you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's that individual freedom to achieve, to overachieve. That's what's been the greatest wealth creator of the modern world. So there's the big problem. So let's move on. The next candidate of interest is Mayor Pete. Got a great CV. I mean, boy, speaks half a dozen languages, Rhodes Scholar, military service, just a very talented individual, no doubt about that. I think that he's in the Obama mold. He's a technocrat who'll shift his policy for what he thinks will get him elected. He's taking democratic policies and just taking the edge off him a bit. Instead of Medicare for all, he calls it Medicare for all that want it. In other words, he's avoided the criticism that people are going to lose their individual insurance healthcare packages, which 180 million Americans are very attached to. Anyway, he's sort of spouting the Democratic position plus opportunities for the new momentum ideas that are coming out as the Democrats move further and further left. But it's a great introduction for him to American voters, and he's a young man with his future in front of him. I think better next time is the answer for Mayor Pete. I guess we'll see in the next month or so whether his campaign has the legs to go the distance, whether he can overcome his immediate lack of name recognition and support with colored Americans, with Hispanics, with African Americans, that Joe Biden crows is his strong point, and it may be, we'll see soon. But that's where Pete, I suspect, is going to fall short. Let's look at the others. Well, as Ben said here, he says Bernie has outlived his times. Times and a half, Ben. He's a guy who follows the Daniel Code very well. I think Bernie is actually he's a fantasy candidate if you're into that thing. If you're a millennial, if you're young enough, if you probably don't actually know what socialism means, if you don't understand how, I mean, honestly, to get through the sort of programs that he's suggesting, I don't think you're going to see it in the United States for a very long time, if ever. So let's look at the others. Amy, the lovely Amy, she's pro-choice, of course, that supports LGBT rights and the Affordable Care Act, and was critical of the Iraq War. All good tick marks to be a Democratic candidate. I don't get her at all, but I have to say, in fairness, that I've never been fond of women politicians. Perhaps Angela Merkel is the exception, but Amy I don't get. Uncle Joe Biden, he's missed his chance. Last cycle was his chance. He's had it now. He's gone. Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren. She's an opportunist, but boy, to me, she's just seriously scary because she is so clever. But I don't think the public are buying it with her. And of course, then the great unknown Mini Mike Bloomberg, the money man. You know, regardless of how he goes with his personal endeavors here, he's doing great things for the Democrats with his advertising. He's spending on his own more money than all of the candidates and Trump combined to date with advertising. And all of that is wonderfully supportive for the Democrats. So lots of questions about him when he gets to the electorate, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Hank hasn't noticed that. Hasn't noticed what, Hank? Anyway, I think it's very interesting because I don't think we understand enough about the other candidates yet. I think we have to wait and see the watershed as we move into the bigger, more racially and culturally diverse states, just to see how Bernie's going to hold up there and how the others are going to perform. So it's a fascinating... Hank, thank you, Hank. Good news on all women in the political scene in the States today. Hope Hicks has returned to work in Trump's re-election campaign, so that's certainly going to make the political pages much more fun to look at. The lovely Hope, we've missed her. Okay, so let's move on. I want to talk to you about the forecast. Feel the burn. I want to talk to you about the forecast that Frank de Beer has put out. Now, those of you who don't know Frank, he's a young Belgian man. He's a farmer in Belgium. He's young. And he came to the Daniel Code tutorial in Taupo, New Zealand, either 2010 or 2011. I'm Forgive me, I haven't refreshed my memory. But he's a charming young man, and he came to me and said, I'm going to do your tutorial. I've read a few of your articles, but I've never seen a financial chart, and I know nothing about trading. And I said, great, you're the best sort of guy for me, because we haven't got to go through the battle of getting rid of all the other ideas that you think you have. And Frank, of course, has turned out to be one of our absolute star traders and analysts. And his particular interest is the Daniel Code Fourth Seal and how it forecasts future price movement. The link at the top of this page is a link to a long article he's written forecasting what he sees from the Daniel Code time cycles into the equity markets, how he sees them happening, what he thinks is going to happen with them. And for those of you who haven't read it, I implore you to read it. He's a very, very clever young man, you know, he runs the Fourth Seal pages for us at the Daniel Code website, and it's an absolute delight and a pleasure to have him with us. Of course, he's now married to Anne, who we brought with him to the tutorial, and they have 2 babies, which is wonderful. So do read that article. That's the link at the top. Just copy-paste that into your browser. If you have any trouble with that, go to the Daniel Code website and scroll down through the news a bit, and you'll see the link is in there as well, about halfway, a bit more down the page. So Frank came up with some very detailed analysis. Now, remember that time cycles and where we're using the Fourth Seal to forecast time and price, they're probabilities. Nothing about the future is baked in granite. We don't see the future. We see only the past. We see the river of the past. Only God sees forward and back. We only see what has happened. But over the years and historically, these Daniel Code time cycles and the Fourth Seal have been so extraordinarily accurate that you would be foolish to not at least be aware of them. And so what he said in summary, he doesn't see much danger in 2020. We know the equity markets are due for a correction, that's for sure. He said, be careful when we hit the 3rd standard deviation of that regression channel. Well, we've rocked through that. As I'm going to show you further on, we're at the 4th standard deviation on the S&P, which is extraordinary. And markets find it very, very hard to hold that level. Now, the last time I talked about this, somebody said, oh, you said that 6 months ago and they kept going up. It doesn't mean that it's the end of the rally. It doesn't mean anything other than what it says. It's very difficult for them to hold that level. And what they'll often do is have a correction. And correction doesn't have to be a great massacre of price because the Daniel Code trading channels combine time and price. The market can simply use up time by working on a slightly lower price frame. That'll have the effect of moving it across, in other words, down the standard deviations. He said he sees a danger. He doesn't see a danger for disaster in the coming years, and thinks they're going to forecast a coming correction rather than the start of a waterfall decline. We will, of course, analyze deeper in the weekly Fourth Seal updates next year. Well, this we're talking about now. That's 2020. He wrote this last year. Those of you who are interested in Frank's work, you can read it every week. It's called The Fourth Seal, and he covers the S&P, gold, and crude oil. And he has weekly reports, which I'll show you, but you should subscribe to them if you're interested. Click on for a free trial at the Daniel Code. Get your free trial and look at the free trials right over everything on the website, and look at Frank's comments. You'll be seriously impressed. He said what scares him is 2021. He says we can't forecast what the 6-day chart is forecasting, and the structure of this market's too far out. Looking at the 48-day, 24 and 12-day chart, it has a solid death cycle coming up for the month of May 2021. This is a clear message from the Daniel Code that 2021 could be the year of reckoning. As we approach this cycle, more and more info will reveal itself, and we will, of course, be on top of developments as they come. That fits well with the usual market reaction of buy the rumor and sell the news, because the health of the market is in many cases at the moment tied up with Donald Trump. He's the ultimate stock booster. He's open and aggressive about wanting higher stock prices. He's open and aggressive about being critical of the Fed for having interest rates steady or up. He's a typical businessman. He wants the dollar, US dollar, as low as possible. That's great for exporters. He wants interest rates as low as possible. That's great for developers, property developers, infrastructure, all sorts of things. And of course, the market, he loves that. That's exactly what the market wants. So Frank's idea fits well with the usual market reaction of buy the rumor, sell the news. So I think that infers, amongst other things, that Trump's going to get re-elected for his second term. And I agree with that. I think he's, at the moment, unless something extraordinary happens with the Democrats, I mean, I just can't see anyone who's going to take him on. I just don't think Bernie is going to really be in contention if he has to face up to Trump. And I think there's very, very serious doubts whether the leadership of the Democratic Party wants Bernie to be the contender. I think there's considerable resistance against that for a whole lot of reasons. So do read this article, I implore you. It's important. And follow Frank's weekly comment at his Fourth Seal commentary. So here he is, the booster-in-chief, whatever you may think of Mr. Trump, and I know that he elicits all sorts of mixed emotions. He's been a great man for the stock market. He's, you remember on election day when it looked like he was going to win, the market took a huge dive, then reversed itself, all on the same day, intraday, roared up like there's no settling, as you say, in the punting business, and it's been doing that ever since. In fact, what these indices have done is quite extraordinary, as we'll see as we just move on here. So here's the S&P. This is the index. This is the 12-day chart, meaning each of those bars is 12 trading days. And if you look at the blue lines where they end, that's back in May 2014. So all of the price action from the lows in March 2009 to about May, June 2014, that's what's set the angle and the speed of the Daniel Code trading channel. And as you can see, there's a solid blue line in the middle of those blue lines. That's the mean or the median. I think it's the mean, actually. Not much difference. And the lines above it are standard deviations from the mean. Now, they're not normal mathematical standard deviations. They're Daniel Code standard deviations, which are different. But I've been showing you this chart for many years, and you can see where the market is now. 1, 2, 3, 4 standard deviations above the mean in the S&P, just hammering it. Extraordinary, isn't it? It looks like the market rushed to get there. Now it's there. What now? Can it go to 5 standard deviations from the mean? Anything is possible in markets. Never say never. We could reconstruct this to run the Daniel Code trading channel from a major low, perhaps the early 2016, late 15 low, and we'd have an entirely different looking picture. But this is the picture we've had, and I've been showing you since 2008. We've been in this business for 11 years, folks, and most of you have seen a whole lot of this stuff over that period. This is the S&P on the 24-day chart, which Frank was talking about, and it is now approaching 4 standard deviations from the mean. Same thing, each of these bars represents 24 trading days on this chart, so it's, if you like, the Daniel Code monthly chart, give you an idea of it. And have a look where this market is, and have a look how insignificant the whole run up to 2007 and the crash to 2009. Have a look how insignificant it's all become in view of this modern growth, which is a separate story all on its own. This is the NASDAQ, and you can see that it's being supported by a series of rising trend lines. That's the pattern. We saw that in the Dow leading up to the top of the dot-com bubble, but typically that sort of pattern is associated with blow-off tops in commodities. Now, this is not a commodity, but it's behaving very much like it, and 65% of the price action in the NASDAQ is being provided by the 4 major FANG stocks. And it's quite extraordinary, 65% coming from those 4 big tech businesses. Extraordinary stuff. Anyway, you need to be aware of that. Now, I want to alert you to something that you're probably not aware of, and there's a rather certainly not transparent, opaque process that the US Fed undertakes with repos, and this is a form of funding that the Fed offers to qualified participants, and it's opaque because we're certainly not ever encouraged to talk about it. There's very little light on what the pricing of these proceedings are, but basically it's the Fed providing liquidity, short-term liquidity, which can be rolled over and rolled over and rolled over for selected market participants who qualify for it. And the security that they're offering the Fed is government bonds and mortgage-backed securities, approved mortgage MBS securities. And at a time when, with all the money the Fed's been pumping in, the short-term funding of those sort of things, they should be in great shape, and they're not. And this has been going on now since well into the middle of last year. That what was thought to be a hiccup, and it was described as difficulties with the plumbing of the Fed liquidity system to these authorized dealers in these securities. It's been described continually as it's just a plumbing issue. It's a plumbing issue. Well, it's been going on so long that it's not a plumbing issue. In my view, there is a systemic problem in the repos that we don't really know enough about. But this is where the big players are, folks, and this is where the big leverage is. And if anything goes wrong with these sorts of players, it's going to contaminate the whole market. So let's see, this is from Zero Hedge, which I find amusing. You might as well. And they announced the maximum size of their overnight repos would shrink from 120 billion to 100 billion, resulting in a substantial decline in the maximum available liquidity when, as I say, the Fed's last 4-term report have already been twice oversubscribed, hinting at another liquidity shortage among dealers in a time where there should be no funding stress at all. But then the next paragraph, on net liquidity, the total liquidity will actually increase because the Fed will inject at least another 60 billion in liquidity via the T-bill monetizations, courtesy of what they call not QE4. And the Fed has been running QE4 for some months now, but doesn't want it to be called that. And there's been very little focus on this, very little commentary on this. Certainly no real understanding of why this is so and why it's going on. but a whole lot of the problems here apparently center around or involve JP Morgan. Someone will know more about that. I'm sure we'll hear more about it in due course. Annus Horribilis, as the Queen said some years ago, meaning just a horrible year, when she had problems with the death of Diana and other issues. We've been having an Annus Horribilis down under in Australia. In fact, we've been having it for some years. They've had 7 years of drought all over the country. It's just been terrible. Properties being destocked, cattle and sheep numbers being run off. And then, of course, that's been followed by the worst bushfires in history, which you call them wildfires in the States. We call them bushfires here, same thing. They have been incredible. They have been savage. The loss of property is immense. The numbers are just so boggling. They don't mean anything as to how much of the natural bush of Australia, which is not bush, it's trees and everything else that goes with it, has been destroyed. How many millions of native animals have been killed in these fires. Just been terrible, terrible thing. And a lot of our clients are on the land, property owners, farmers, graziers, etc. And it's been a terrible thing to have to live through this with your animals suffering. So all droughts eventually break with floods, and this was no exception. The Gold Coast, where I live, it's the southeast coast of Queensland, the sort of resort capital of Australia. It's on track to record the wettest month ever. I mean, I told you earlier about a metre of rainwater in the pool. I mean, it's been extraordinary. Our immediate neighbour, the south, the Tweed Heads area, it's been proclaimed a disaster area. Many of the coastal areas of New South Wales have got the same sort of problem. And to top it all off, the new latest cyclone, which is it Ulysses or Ulysses? It begins with a U. Let me see if I can pronounce that for you. It's probably of no interest to you unless you happen to live around this part of the world. Cyclone, where is it? Cyclone. No, it hasn't come up quickly enough for me, so I won't waste your time with it. Other than to say that it's a fairly low key. I think like a Category 2 cyclone is not the end of the world, but it'll be like feeling the end of the world if you're underneath it. And Lord Howe Island, the most, in my view, one of the prettiest islands in the world. It's where, after the mutiny on the Bounty, it's where the mutineers went to and settled there. And it's the most lovely, lovely place. I've been there a number of times. It's wonderful, so delightful. But at the moment, it's right in the eye of this hurricane, cyclone, actually we call them here, which is going to go right over the top of it very shortly. So that's made things pretty nasty here recently. On top of that, we've now got trouble in the federal coalition. They're the groups that govern us. It's called the coalition government, a coalition between the Australian Liberal Party, which is not liberal, it's a Conservative Party. Those of you who have trouble with that sort of name in other parts of the world, and it's a coalition between the National Party, the Conservative Party, I should say, and the National Party, which used to be the Country Party. And that's another political grouping, quite small, of people who specifically live in the Australian rural areas, and it's based on votes from people who live in the rural areas. And of course, their mandate is to do more for their electorate, more for the people who support them. And that's all blown up. We've now got a challenge for the leadership of the National Party. I call them the Country Party, so you know what I mean. And that's the federal government only has a one-seat majority in the current parliament. So troubles in paradise can lead to real problems very quickly. Coronavirus, bad news, hasn't really impacted us directly, but Australia, no country is more dependent on China. Tourism education, there are 270,000 Chinese nationals in Australian universities. That might be an overstatement. That statement, I think it's 270,000 non-Australian nationals in our university. The vast majority of them are Chinese. Tourism, we just depend. China's tourism to Australia is the lifeblood of our tourism. Education, massive. I mean, when I tell you these numbers, remember you're talking about a country that's only 24 million people in total. Iron ore, it's our biggest export market. Other mining. And if there's a serious slowdown in China, which is heading that way at the moment, Australia economy is going to take a decent size hit. And of course, the floating currency that we have is the safety valve. And I think there's a real opportunity for traders. And in fact, I'm going to call this the best short for 2020. This is the Australian US dollar Forex pair, as you can see. It's down, poking its nose down towards 65. The previous recent low in 2008 was 60.08, and I think it's going to take that out. So it'll be really interesting. It's not going to be a sudden movement. It's going to take time. There's been terrific support by the government, amongst others, around that 67 level, and it's trying to break that decisively now. And the next black line, very important, 65.65, a close below that black line would turn the propensity and the probabilities excuse me, towards the market taking out the old lows, which are at 60.08. This has been my favourite short for a number of years now. I can't believe that Australia's dollar at one stage, and for a number of years through 10, 11, early 12, was 8% stronger than the US. Wow, crazy stuff. Anyway, what goes up must come down in almost everything except US equity markets. But don't forget, all markets are mean reverting. We may not know the time, but don't forget the truth of that statement. Okay, so that was there. Now, the true magic of the Daniel Code. Over the weekend, folks, I'm preparing a detailed examination of the Daniel Code price charts and all that they infer. So lately we've been more interested in time trading than price signals, but we mustn't lose sight of our original hypothesis, which launched the Daniel Code website, that the Daniel Code controls all markets in both time and price. And I'm going to do a fairly voluminous document to send to you and to put on the website, looking at how the Daniel Code price targets work and how they affect markets. And it's extraordinary. I haven't talked about it for a long time, but going back and preparing for this paper, I mean, I'm amazed. It's extraordinary stuff, and no one is more amazed than me, which is quite a statement. So don't miss that. If you're not already on our mailing list, I guess if you're at the webinar today, you probably are on our mailing list. But if not, do let Terry know that you want to get a copy of that. This is a nice, simple example today of the Daniel Code price charts. Have a look at this. We had the blue line at 1589, and that yesterday created a TO3 and blue line sell signal. This is sugar for execution today, and look at it. Wow, whoosh. What stopped it? The blue line, the high of that bar, is only 2 ticks through that blue line, which is like nothing, less than a hair. And you see this on these price charts again and again and again. And I'm going to give you some stunning examples, and I'm going to hope that you give it some thought, because people often say to me, what's the best indicator? And truly the best indicator I've ever seen is how markets react to these Daniel Code price numbers. And it's extraordinary, but you've got to get your head around it and understand the various ways that markets can show target recognition, which they do on a constant basis. Here's coffee for our 6S clients and folks. You can see that coffee has knocked out about some part of $12,000 in the 2020 so far. Been a couple of big trending movements there, and 6S is about keeping you in the trades that are running a bit, and that's the cream on the cake. That's how you make the money. So if you haven't already, get your free trial of the Daniel Code and have a look at the 6S signals and see what the opportunities are there for you. They're amazing. A lot of money. If you want to be a super trader, we're just about up for time. Let me know. I'll be happy to give you a Daniel Code trading tutorial. If you are interested, write to me, please, jneedham@thedanielcode.com. Let me know your phone number and where you live, and I'm happy to give you a call and have a chat about it. So lately we've had a couple of inquiries for tutorials, and I've sent out the documentation and haven't heard from those folks again. There's a few of them. And of course, look, it's expensive. It's $7,500. I have never had anyone ever say that it was not cheap at the price, but it's a lot of money to find in one hit for most people. And if you'd like to do the Daniel Code tutorial, but price is an issue for you, let me know what we can do to give you some terms, spread it over a period of time that might suit you, and I'm always more than happy to accommodate you on that. So let's move on. Free trials. If you haven't already, just click on the free trial link at the Daniel Code website and follow what goes on there. Follow the prompts. Any problems, contact Terry at support@thedanielcode.com. Finally, here's our compliance statement. The short version of it is, please, I beg you, do not trade with real money until you are sure that you are a competent trader. It's very, very easy to lose money trading futures. Once you're good at it, it's very easy to make money trading futures. But if you'd like to be a seriously good futures trader, let me know. It'd be my pleasure to teach you. Okay, and I think that's about it for the day, folks. I don't think we have anything of great significance for you other than to wish you well for the weekend, and thank you for being here with us, Jeff and Mike, of course, and Adrian. Great to have you all with us. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope there's something there for you to think about, because markets, don't be too confident about them. I know they seem incredibly strong, and I'm sure they are, but don't ever fall into the sucker trap of thinking that markets can only go one way. I assure you they can change very, very quickly, and you'll follow the Daniel Code signals. You will get it before anyone else. And that's it. Any idea when the indices will turn in the US for Steve? Well, the document, just let me open the website, Steve, so I can tell you. So this is the Daniel Code website, www.thedanielcode.com. Go down a few, and here you'll see it's headed the Outlook for 2020, 2021. This is the article here. Just left click on that, and it will come up, and it's Frank DB's analysis of equities for 2020, 2021. Of course, for most of you, we won't be looking so long term. The markets are well and truly overdue for a pullback any time now. But if you follow the Daniel Code trading signals, you won't miss them. We very, very rarely miss an important turn, and we've been doing this a long time. So the best thing, Steve, get yourself onto the Daniel Code, do your free trial, have a look at the TO3 Plus signals. If you want a closer fix in, have a look at the 6S signals as well. And I don't know when it will, but I'm not an unbridled optimist like most Wall Street analysts. I've seen too many things in many years I've been trading, and that's why I love trading. Markets go up. Trading futures is a dream, precisely because markets pay exactly the same going down as they do going up. In fact, they pay a little bit faster generally. Love it all. So thanks for that, folks, and I'll look forward to talking to you at our next webinar, which will be usually in a fortnight. That's 14 nights or 2 weeks. Fortnight's an English expression, British expression, doesn't get used much in America. So fortnight means 2 weeks. That's the simple part. And I recommend you, if you go and get your free trial, the Daniel Code, you can go to up here, and this is Frank's the Fourth Seal, S&P, crude, and gold. And you can see, I'll just give you a sneak of this. This is his Fourth Seal analysis. This is the 59 cycle on the 6-day chart for the S&P. And he'll publish sometimes 2 charts. He gives you the support and resistance numbers, and he gives you some very, very good commentary. He's a very smart young man. I recommend you go and have a look at that, and if you're interested, do subscribe to it. Okay, that's it for now. Enjoy your weekend, guys. Thanks, Neil, for being with us, and I'll look forward to meeting with you soon. All the best for now. Bye-bye.